Hello everyone. In this video we are going to study hypothalamus and pituitary gland. Hypothalamus is a part of nervous system. It is the part of the brain. Essentially the limbic system of the brain. And the pituitary gland is an endocrine gland. So therefore they serve to be connecting the nervous system and the endocrine system. The limbic system comprises of hippocampus, amygdala and the hypothalamus. Hippocampus helps in storing memory. It is related to the learning process, and amygdala is related to all the emotions, the anger, fear, rage, etc. We have studied hypothalamus in my previous videos when I was dealing with brain. So this is actually the floor of thalamus to which the pituitary gland is attached. So the pituitary gland is also known as the master gland. I'll draw a small diagram. This is the P-shaped pituitary gland which is connected to the hypothalamus. If this region is the hypothalamus, this stalk is infundibulum and this is the pituitary gland. So to the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland is attached by a small stalk called as infundibulum. The pituitary gland is formed from the pharynx. During the formation of the pituitary gland, it is actually formed from a projection of pharynx which is known as Rathke's pouch. Rathke's pouch. This Rathke's pouch has three portions: pars distalis, pars tuberalis and pars intermedia. So what happens is the pars distalis and pars tuberalis together form the anterior lobe of the pituitary. So they form the anterior lobe. So what I have drawn over here is the anterior lobe of the pituitary. So this separates pars intermedia. So this forms the intermediate lobe. This is the intermediate lobe, and this region is the posterior lobe of the pituitary. In this manner, the pituitary gland has three lobes. The anterior lobe, here is the small intermediate lobe, and this is the posterior lobe. So what happens is that hypothalamus has certain cells, and these cells secrete the hormones. The cells that are secreted by hypothalamus are called as neurohormones. These neurohormones come via this direction into the anterior lobe, and from the anterior lobe there are several hormones, 7 hormones that are secreted, and there are certain hormones which are also secreted to the posterior lobe. But then it's not the posterior lobe which is secreting it. The posterior lobe only stores those 2 hormones. We are going to study in detail about the hormones that are secreted by each lobe, but the hormones which are secreted by the hypothalamus are known as neurohormones, because these hormones are secreted by the neurons, not the glands. The neurohormones are also known as the releasing hormones, and these are secreted by the hypothalamus, as I told you. So what do these neurohormones do? These come and allow the pituitary to secrete the trophic hormones. The trophic hormones go to the respective endocrine glands and then they secrete their respective hormones. So it is actually the hypothalamus which is secreting the neurohormones, which stimulates the pituitary, and the pituitary secretes trophic hormones which goes to different endocrine glands, and then these different endocrine glands secrete the hormones. So therefore the pituitary is known as the master gland because it is controlling the secretion of the different endocrine glands. It stimulates the different endocrine glands. The neurohormones are the releasing hormones which are secreted by the hypothalamus, which comes and stimulates the pituitary, have both the effects. It can be stimulatory as well as it can be inhibitory. So when it wants to stimulate the pituitary gland, at that time it will be the stimulatory hormones, and when it wants to stop those hormones, those would be the inhibiting hormones. Now let us study the different lobes of the pituitary and the different secretions of the pituitary. The pituitary gland is also known as hypophysis. Apart from being the master gland, this is scientifically called as hypophysis. It is divided into three lobes: the anterior lobe, also known as Adeno Hypothesis, intermediate lobe, pars intermedia, and posterior lobe, Neuro Hypothesis. Each lobe secretes different hormones. Let us first study the anterior lobe, also known as Adeno Hypothesis. The first hormone secreted by Adeno Hypothesis is the growth hormone. The abbreviation is GH, also known as STH or somatotrophic hormone. Since this goes and affect the somatic cells, and it obviously says that it will help in the growth, so it helps in storing protein, calcium, and helps in the growth of visceral organs and building up the arms and the legs. So the entire body is affected by the growth hormone. What will happen if the hyposecretion of growth hormone will take place? On hyposecretion at an early age, there is a condition called as dwarfism. So the child is dwarf and is not able to grow properly, and therefore his height is not proper. If the hyposecretion takes place at a later age, this was the dwarfism is caused when the child is small, and at that time the hyposecretion of growth hormone takes place. But if the child has attained normal height, so after being 15 years or 16 years, after that when the child has grown enough, then the hyposecretion of growth hormone takes place. There is a condition called as acromegaly, in which the height is proper, but then the arms and legs do not have a proportion. Usually the fingers are very big and the arms are too long, and the bones of the hands grow inadequately, and therefore it may be either very small or it may be very large. The torso is also affected in acromegaly. Patients of acromegaly have a big torso and the hind limbs are small. So these two are the diseases caused by hyposecretion of growth hormone: dwarfism at an early age, acromegaly at a later age. Now hypersecretion. What will happen when the growth hormone is secreted more in amount? This obviously will cause a condition called as gigantism, in which the human being grows extraordinarily tall. The body is huge, and as compared to a normal person, the patient looks like a giant, and so this condition is referred to as gigantism. These conditions cannot be reversed back, and neither there is any medicine to alter the condition. The second hormone secreted by adenohypophysis is the TSH. We often use the abbreviation form, otherwise it stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. So, the TSH secreted by the Adeno Hypothesis will stimulate the thyroid gland, and thyroid gland will then secrete the regular hormone thyroxine. The third hormone secreted by the Adeno Hypothesis is ACTH. It stands for adrenocorticotropic hormone. This stimulates the adrenal cortex of the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland is present above the kidneys. These are also known as suprarenal glands and is divided into two regions, adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla. So ACTH will stimulate the adrenal cortex, and then adrenal cortex will secrete the hormones which we generally call as corticoids. The FSH, the fourth hormone, which stands for follicle stimulating hormone. These stimulate the gonads for gametogenesis. Gametogenesis is the process in which the gametes are formed. So, if it is secreted in male, it will stimulate the process of spermatogenesis to produce sperms, and if it is in females, the gonads will be stimulated. The gonads are ovaries, and these will be stimulated to produce the ovum by the process of oogenesis. The fifth one is LH, which stands for luteinizing hormone. This is essentially secreted in females. The luteinizing hormone is produced in females. The LH from the Adeno Hypothesis will stimulate the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum is the remnant of the Graafian follicle. The Graafian follicle releases the secondary oocyte during the process of ovulation, and the remnant of Graafian follicle turns into corpus luteum, which becomes endocrine in function and releases the hormone progesterone. So, this is only in females. The counterpart of this in males is ICSH. The ICSH stands for interstitial cell stimulating hormone. The interstitial cells are also known as the Leydig's cells. So, when ICSH reaches the Leydig cells, these cells will be stimulated to produce the hormone testosterone. So, in males, ICSH will be produced to stimulate the Leydig cells to produce testosterone, while in females, the luteinizing hormone will be produced to stimulate the corpus luteum to produce progesterone. So, this is the sixth hormone, and the last one is prolactin. Prolactin is also known as LTH, called as lactotrophic hormone. This hormone stimulates the mammary glands to produce milk. So, as I said that the neurohormones will stimulate the endocrine glands, the pituitary gland, and pituitary will send prolactin to produce milk by the mammary glands, and this is the stimulatory effect. After some time, around 6 months or more, then it is not compulsory that this particular time that I am speaking should be in every females. It should not be compulsorily in every females, but usually after 6 months, the inhibitory hormone for prolactin is produced by the hypothalamus, and therefore gradually the milk stops secreting from the mammary glands. So when it is stimulated, the mammary glands will start producing the milk, and when it is inhibited, when the prolactin is inhibited, then the mammary glands stop producing the milk. So these are the hormones that are produced by the Adeno Hypothesis. Now let us see the second lobe, pars intermedia, which is known as the intermediate lobe. This lobe secretes just one hormone called as MSH, melanocyte stimulating hormone. The melanocytes are the cells that secrete the melanin. Melanin is a brown colored pigment which gives the color to the skin of human beings. However, the MSH has no role in the pigmentation of skin in man. However, it has been found that it darkens the skin of fish and amphibians as it stimulates the synthesis of melanin. So this is the only hormone, the sole hormone that is produced by the intermediate lobe. Now let us see the last lobe, the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland, which is also known as the Neuro Hypothesis. It is so called as Neuro Hypothesis because the hypothalamus secretes the hormones through the neurons, and this is just stored in the posterior lobe. It is not actually secreting it, but it is just storing it and then producing the two hormones. The two hormones are vasopressin. The first one is vasopressin, which is also known as ADH, or anti-diuretic hormone. This is produced in the kidney and it helps in the reabsorption of water. So if anti-diuretic hormone is not secreted properly, the water from the renal tubules will not be absorbed properly, and therefore the disorder will be hyposecretion. That means a lot of water, on hyposecretion, a lot of water will be produced in the urine. So the urine will be produced copiously because there is ample amount of water and water is not reabsorbed due to the hyposecretion of ADH or anti-diuretic hormone. This is also known as vasopressin. So this condition in which there is copious flow of urine out of the body is known as diabetes insipidus. It is sometimes asked in the question paper to differentiate between diabetes insipidus and diabetes mellitus. So in diabetes insipidus, there is no trace of sugar in the urine. When we have studied pancreas in my previous videos, I told you that diabetes mellitus is a condition in which glycosuria takes place. That means there is ample amount of glucose which is released in the urine. But here there is much amount of water which is not reabsorbed due to the hyposecretion of anti-diuretic hormone, and therefore this condition dehydrates the person, which may even lead to death. This is known as diabetes insipidus. The second hormone is oxytocin. The oxytocin is also known as the birth hormone because this helps in uterine contractions and contraction and relaxation during the childbirth. The process of childbirth is called as parturition. So during parturition, when the uterus contracts and relaxes, the childbirth takes place, and this is at a particular time at the end of the gestation period. So oxytocin is produced at the end of the gestation period. It is only by the stimulatory effect of the oxytocin that the uterus will start contracting and relaxing. Later, when there is an inhibitory effect, the oxytocin is stopped producing. When the oxytocin oxytocin is not produced naturally, then the artificial methods of injecting the oxytocin is there in the females so that the parturition may take place. So this is all about the three lobes of the pituitary gland, the Adeno Hypothesis, pars intermedia, and the Neuro Hypothesis. If you have any doubt, you may ask me in the comment section and refer to the questions given in the description box. Thank you.